Hopefully you're here to hear SAP, credit cards, and the bird that talks too much, and hear Ertunga Arsal. Please give him a warm welcome.
Hello, everyone. No, I'm used not having too many people in the same room who are interested in SAP security. This is always like this. Maybe the only place would be the SAP headquarters or somewhere similar. But all right. So, welcome to our presentation about SAP and payment cards and business processes. So, this talk is not for people who have, let's say, a lot of experience in SAP, which is good because typically when we start getting into too many technical details of these kind of things, then I see that people are starting to fall asleep. I wanted to present another aspect of the SAP security. Typically in these kind of conferences, we talk about, I don't know, rootkits, exploits. We have a lot of them also. But I wanted to talk about the business processes behind them and what the attackers can actually accomplish. So we'll have an introduction about the business processes. Then we'll talk about SAP systems in general in case there are people who don't know what SAP systems really are. Then we'll have an exploit demo. And then we'll get into the credit cards topic. We'll shortly discuss the payment solutions that are running on SAP systems or that are attached to SAP systems. And we're going to finalize it with discussing how we can be secure. So, I mean, here you see a Twitter account. The tweets are interesting, though I don't know whether we can read them properly. But these are tweets of credit card numbers, including the CVV code, expiration, etc. So we'll get to this one. The business processes. So SAP, I mean, when I say SAP here, it means the SAP applications, of course, not directly the company. The SAP is the dominating system in business. And the ERP application of SAP, or the business suite, translates the business processes to the digital world. And that was the smart move 30 years ago and still is. That's why all the businesses, or most of them, at least the largest enterprises, use SAP systems. These systems cover all different aspects of business. It can be procurement, it can be payments, HR, other parts of it. And in the SAP world, there's something called customizations. What this actually means is that SAP is a system which has its own, let's say, runtime, and people are actually writing programs running on the SAP systems. And this is somehow called customization, but it is in reality programming. So, SAP is the core of major businesses, and attacking this core is not that difficult. First of all, the biggest problem in SAP security is that these systems are extremely complex systems. They have tons of different components. And I mean, if you work at an IT project, you know, the moment you try to do hardening of the operating system or database or other components, then things start breaking. So these systems are very rarely hardened. And sometimes it is even very, very difficult to patch these systems. Well, on top of it, there is the additional components that can be installed on the SAP system. These are SAP applications by third parties. These can be document management solutions, scanner solutions on an enterprise scale. So when we look at the SAP systems, the most critical attack vectors are, first of all, the authentication. So year 2014 and default password is one of the biggest problems in SAP systems. I mean, I think there's a reason for it. When you have an SAP system, you don't have a single user database. So in SAP, there's something called client, which has actually nothing to do with the typical server, client, TCP, whatever terminology. The client is just, there's a different, you can see it as a different user database. And in one SAP system, there can be up to 999 clients, or these different organizational units. And typically, the administrators have access to the productive client. So they can see the users from this client, and they cannot see the other ones. But in reality, everything is stored in a single database. So if somebody has access to any other clients and finds a way to execute ABAP statements or SQL statements, then it means they can access to the data of other components as well. So the default passwords, number one problem. The weak passwords, I mean, when we analyze SAP systems, we do also password weakness tests. And we have done it until now more than on 3 million business users. And I can say that if an SAP system doesn't have proper password policy activated, which means the typical minimum 8 characters, whatever kind of settings. In this case, in a very, very short time, more than 20-25% of the passwords can be recovered. These are business users. And the statistics for the ones where there is some password policy applied is around 8%. I mean, you can think, okay, 8%, it means 92% is secure, but these systems typically have tens of thousands of users, so on large enterprises. So it's easy to do the math. And you need just one account to actually compromise the full system. The SSO, single sign-on, is a very, very popular topic. The single sign-on is a convenience feature. It is not a security feature. So what happens is there's an ERP system, and then people start attaching a CRM system, SRM system, and different type of components to these systems. And they say, oh, everybody's using different accounts, let's harmonize the accounts, let's have single sign-on. In reality, it means that an internet-facing system can generate logon tickets, which can be used even on the core systems. So these are also dangerous parts. There are also a lot of different parts. The user authorization is the one that all the companies focus on, which I see generally a waste of effort, because usually companies focus only on that part, but not the other parts of the security. So the ABAP code security or system security is usually forgotten. And when we look at the fraud, real actual fraud on business systems, this is generally done by more than 2 persons. So you have a segregation of duties matrix which forbids the actions of a user, but then 2 guys get together and then there's fraud. So how can it be attacked? First example is the third-party components. If you are using SAP systems, most likely you have some document management software or archiving software. And OpenText or Ixos is one of the most popular ones. So until now, honestly speaking, we have rarely seen any system or any company which doesn't have it, which means they're quite successful. But they have a remotely enabled function which had a very critical vulnerability. And this vulnerability allowed ABAP injection. The ABAP is the core language of SAP. So you can see it like a driver. I mean, you can, if you are able to execute ABAP commands, this means you are in ring 0 basically. So it never crashes, you have ring 0 access, and you can do anything on the business systems. So here, I mean, just to show you the shellcode that we had, I don't know if you can see it properly, but I mean, it's from extracting salary data to changing bank accounts or listing cardholder data. You can do many things. Everything that the system can do, you can also program it to do. So OpenText has patched this flaw, but none of the companies have any process for third-party add-ons on SAP software. So if we're talking about Adobe Flash or other third-party components on the workstations, it is now pretty much a standard to patch them. But it is new that the SAP systems get regular patching, and it is almost non-existent that these third-party add-ons go through any kind of security audit. So they are there, they're in your ERP systems, and people can get full access to your ERP systems with them. Looking at the core, one example is a vulnerability we found last year. We found in 2011, SAP patched it last year. This vulnerability is quite interesting, actually. It allows you to execute operating system commands on the SAP system as the application server user. So what does it mean? You can do anything the application server can do, right? Most probably you cannot format the hard drives because it's not running on the root, but still it is a lot. Or at least you can access to the database, which is the business data. So SAP released a patch for this and then said this is a medium risk issue. I don't know why. I don't know, because maybe you don't see a shell directly. So then they patched this. Then we analyzed the patch, of course, after some time, and we found a way to bypass this patch. So what happens is 4 months later, they released another patch to patch the patch, and this time it got 7.5 risk rating out of 10. So still not 10. So let's have a short exploit demo, then we see a little bit about this, because I want to get past to this OS command execution and these kind of things. We'll focus on the business part. So here I have 2 VMware machines. One is the SAP system. This is our victim. And one is our attacker workstation. Okay? So I'm just gonna enumerate the system right now. So when I do it, I restrict the number of seats so that it goes a little bit faster. So right now, we are assuming that we are in the network and we have no information about the SAP system. We are just looking what kind of information we can get from the SAP system. And we are doing, of course, a little bit more. So ignore the green and red parts because these show the vulnerabilities, but the left side is done by typical SAP system enumeration. So what I'll do now is I'll launch a remote shell, and let me try whether this one works. So I'll launch a remote shell on the SAP system, and I'll try to execute this. This is our penetration testing application, by the way, so you understand what we're talking about. This is not, of course, part of SAP. So basically, we executed a command remotely, and of course, we cannot get any output out. But if we had done something like that, let's see whether this works. And you see we have a file here. So we are able to execute operating system commands on the remote system. And this was the medium risk issue. So what we can do here is we can actually let me see. We can actually execute a command for the database interface, where we can say, okay, activate or install a user and then make it administrator. So this is what I'm doing now. And what I do is I reactivate an admin user and then set its password hash to something that I know so that I can log in with this user. So this is the SAP system, and we are using the user admin with our passwords. And you see that we are connected to the system. So right now we have admin access on the SAP system. And this works this simple actually. So it is not a big wonder to get a remote shell out of SAP systems. SAP is of course doing a lot to fix them. And recently they also fixed a lot of issues. But this is what can happen. And this is the part where technical people are usually the most interested. So they like seeing that we have a remote code execution and we can do something. We can get an admin account. But the real story starts after this. What happens when you have an admin account on an SAP system? What can you do? So we can exploit the business processes, of course. So let me go back to our presentation. First, what is a business process? Business process is basically a collection of activities for producing special service or product for customers. So they start with the customer's need and they end with these needs fulfillment. The famous example here is the pin factory by Adam Smith. Adam Smith said, in a pin factory, instead of each person producing pins, if they find a way to divide these tasks to different smaller tasks, and which is called division of labor, and then people get specialized in these tasks, it is possible to increase the efficiency. And in this example, he mentioned that the factory would be able to produce more than 240 times output. And this is what we have today. So everything is more specialized and more focused on its tasks. And these business processes are today adapted in the SAP systems to be able to do them digitally instead of people signing papers. So how can we attack some business processes? I mean, an interesting would be analyzing how a company pays its invoices, right? Every big company has tons of different kind of invoices each month. I mean, do you need a purchase order so that you can get goods, or do you have something like telecommunications invoices where you need to pay each month? So let's assume there are thousands of employees in a company. They are not paying for each person an individual invoice for the mobile phones, from the company mobile phones. So in this case, these processes are in the SAP system. So what can an attacker do? The attacker can first go to the payment history of the vendors and look and try to find out which vendors have the most volume. So this is there is a transaction for this SALR transaction, and this gives the vendor payment history where you can filter out and see which vendors are important for our target. So the attacker goes to this transaction, runs this transaction, and then filters the vendors which have, let's say, which the company will pay more than 10,000 euros. So in this case, this is done by putting a filter in the balance part. You should of course put a minus 10,000 because the company will not be getting money, it will be paying money. And you should put a smaller sign so that you can get the amounts which are bigger than that. So when we do this, you get a list of the companies where there is a payment due in the next month. So in this case, there's a company where roughly 750,000 euros will be paid. This is close to 1 million US dollars. So the attacker has information about this invoice now. So what can the attacker do? The attacker can replace the bank account. So the bank accounts are also maintained in the SAP system. So generally, if when this data is maintained, a bank CD is created or an electronic form is used for sending this information to the banks or the payment processor. And if somebody changes, but these changes are in the SAP system and approved and with proper processes, then nobody can verify them. So they go, they slip. And this can be done using a transaction SAP. This is called FK02. The attacker can run this transaction. Then, based on the information, choose this vendor and look at the bank account of this vendor and then just change the bank account. And then put his own bank account, probably. I mean, putting a personal bank account where you will get $1 million would not be very wise, right? Putting a corporate account will not be wise either, so don't do it. So, but anyways, so there is a 4 eyes principle in this process. So when you change this account, somebody else in the company should approve it. But since we are able to compromise the system, then you can change the password of the other user as well. So change the bank account, change the manager's password, log in as the manager, approve the bank account change, and then it is possible to get this transfer done at the next payment run. So one thing to add here, this is a one-shot kind of attack to the SAP systems. Imagine doing it with multiple bank accounts. I mean, I don't know how is it in US, but in Germany, now the name, the beneficiary in the bank account doesn't mean anything anymore. So it is just about the number. So in the name of the bank account, it can say, I don't know, Vodafone, but it can be transferred to another entity. So this would be a way to get quick cash out of SAP systems, and the detection can take long if there aren't proper security measures. So imagine there should be a time to pay the bills, the company thinks it paid the bills, the other party is waiting for the money to be transferred, it takes a couple of days, or maybe they wait for a month, and then they ask, hey, you didn't pay your bills, and then some people start waking up. So there's a time window where the attacker can, I don't know, go to Bahamas or wherever. So for this part, we should assume that the SAP systems is now compromised by certain ways, by collusion, by exploiting vulnerabilities, or by existing rights. And let's look at what else can be done on these systems. But before that, we'll talk a little bit about the payment cards, because we also want to see how the payment cards can be extracted from SAP systems, right? So that we can protect them. So, credit cards on SAP systems. The payment card processing on SAP systems. I mean, if you are, the companies that need to be PCI DSS compliant, maybe if you are working in such a company, you should pay a little bit more attention to this part. It can be also interesting for you. The SAP systems hold payment card data in various places. They are used by business functions, of course, if you have sales or sales distribution, if you have retail point of sale, or if you have HR, the employee self-service for travel reimbursements. Then you are using this functionality of SAP. So the cardholder data passes through the SAP system, and this information is stored on this system on many occasions. So it can be the data tables, change logs, transaction logs, many different areas. So only few external solutions use tokenizing, and I mean, this is quite rare. Generally, we find a lot of payment card data in clear text in SAP systems. When we researched, there were more than 50 database tables which contain credit card numbers or payment card numbers. The tables, some of them are empty, some of them have content. This is depending on which sub-modules are used in a company. So these are typically the BSEC-C and the FPLT-C tables. These are the tables we find almost everywhere. Or if there's an HR system, these are the PA 0105 tables. So how do we access these tables? SAP is a transaction for reading the database contents, and this is the SE16. So you just need to go to this transaction and give the name of the table. And there's a filter criteria, so if you want to just get the MasterCards or Visas, you can also do that. And then you have all the credit card numbers. So suddenly you are not PCI DSS compliant anymore, right? And it is not ideal that somebody else does it. How could we do it remotely? It is possible to use the remote function calls of SAP. Or if it's an internet-facing system in the SAP landscape, it shouldn't be, but usually we find out that there is the SOAP RFC protocol enabled on these systems, which means it is possible to have HTTP requests which are then translated to remote function calls where you can actually extract the credit card information using the RFC read table function. So we could use the subsucker for it. Do you know what subsucker is? There's a bird. I mean, interestingly, woodpecker, and it's called subsucker. So there's a free tool now, which we're deciding to release. If you're interested, you can always send me an email. It is named after the famous bird, and it allows accessing to these SAP tables via HTTP, HTTPS, or RFC protocols. And the interesting is if there's single sign-on and you manage to do a cross-site scripting, which normally nobody cares, right? In SAP, you are able to extract the MySAP SSO2 cookies. And using these cookies, it is actually possible to connect to the core system with different protocols as well. So you can use the RFC protocol, remote function calls, and then get this data out of SAP systems. So it supports subrouter as well, and it is good for easily extracting and filtering sensitive data, which are stored in clear text in SAP. So how about the data which is not in clear text, so the encrypted data? PCI DSS says we need to encrypt the data, right? There are certain tables in SAP where this encrypted information is stored. But even on production systems, there is an SAP functionality called RS repair source, which you can spawn to create a new program in the SAP system, if you have the right access, of course. So the attacker can create a new program that decrypts credit cards and then decrypt all the credit card numbers which are encrypted in the system. So this is possible. There are two critical function modules here. This is the C-card develop E and CCNUM decryption function modules. Using this, the encryption is isolated there, so you don't need to do much. They just work. So if you are using external solutions like Paymetric or other solutions, they also have some functionality to decrypt the credit card numbers. And the interesting thing is we discovered a crime gang who is actually doing this. And they are sharing their experiences. So I don't know whether this is a crime gang or not, but this is what we found in SAP community network, where the developers discuss their development problems. And I just want to read this part. Hi experts, I am using CCNAM decryption function module to decrypting card number inside loop to see the full credit card number. It takes so much time. Any function module for decrypting multiple card numbers at a time, it is very urgent. So I don't know what happened afterwards, and I don't know what was the urgency to decrypt credit card numbers in a row, but I don't know. I mean, it's sub-community network. I mean, you find all sorts of weird things there. Creepy, right? So, the external payments card solutions on SAP. There are a handful of solutions which make this storing sensitive data easier for SAP customers. Paymetric, GMA Pay, etc. These companies have very good solutions. But if you have a secure solution plus an insecure SAP system, at the end it is the same, because the data comes somehow to the SAP system, or the SAP system redirects to another portal for entering the credit card numbers. But you can change and you can really modify how the redirection should work, right? So it doesn't have to go to the portal of this external vendors. It can be any malicious website as well. But the standard, substandard is using registered RFC servers. And this is the standard concept. So in this concept, there is the SAP system running a sub gateway also, gateway service. And there is the PCI payment card server, which is connecting the SAP system to the merchant or the bank. So the PCI server registers its service on the SAP system and says, hey, I am able to process payment cards. Then SAP applications send this information to the PCI server, and then they get the status, whether the transaction is approved or declined. The external programs also are able to send information to the payment card servers. So this information is only, this access to the payment card server is only protected on the SAP system by an access control list, which is called the Reginfo access control list. The common issues we see are that the customer does not configure this access control list, or customer doesn't have the proper SAP patch installed, which means the access control list can be bypassed even though it is actually configured. Another way to configure this is using SAP's program to generate the access control list. And it analyzes the system and generates a very long access control list, but there's a catch there. The access list generated forbids registering new services or shutting down services, but the access is set to star. So it means you can access to these services. And if the payment card processors are using predictable names, service names, it is possible to just query for the servers and then get the credit card information without any kind of authentication. So in this case, again, the SAP system is here. In the first case, the evil external programs sent the request to the SAP system, which forwards it to the payment card server, and then they can extract the credit card information. In the other one, they can actually block these services, or they can manipulate these services. And if they have a way of, let's say, ordering goods from the company, they can send fake responses saying transaction succeeded. So they can manipulate that part as well. The modern solutions that are using SAP technologies such as PI or XI systems have also a lot of fatal flaws when they are misconfigured. One is that the debugging is not switched off. Another one is that these credit card numbers are stored in the logs of these systems because of improper configuration. And the encryption is generally not in place between these systems. So again, this problem with redirecting to another server for inserting the credit card number is flawed because you can change the source of redirection. If you add the knowledge of PCI DSS auditors or tools on top of this, and they usually don't have much clue, this is a problematic situation. So these allow, at the end, man-in-the-middle attacks for the settlement and authorization functions for credit cards, which allows credit card theft on a massive scale, or fake transaction authorization. This is, of course, foreseeable consequences, brand damage, legal consequences, etc. And there are some unforeseeable ones, and we want to have a little bit of fun with it, so something more entertaining. Whenever I visit SAP conferences, everywhere they say SAP should be more social networking enabled. So we said, okay, nice. Can we tamper and inject code into credit card processing functions for capturing this information? Yes, we can. So we introduced Tweets BTTM. So this is the first SAP credit card to Twitter interface. So basically, whenever you go and buy something from a shop running SAP systems, then the SAP system tweets this credit card. This was the picture that we have seen. So this requires patching SAP's code, of course, with an injection flow, and this voids your warranty most probably and supports. And if something doesn't work, there is always a fallback to DNS tunneling. So what were the challenges? The biggest challenge was actually getting SAP do HTTPS connections to Twitter APIs. Twitter changed this last year, so now we need to use HTTPS, which is good. Isn't it good that your credit cards are tweeted with an encrypted channel? And this is painful because you need to import the certificate of the Twitter. So there are some workarounds to do that. For an unknown reason, there is around 1 to 3 seconds delay per tweet. And if something doesn't work, still there is the beautiful RFC host to IP function in SAP, which you can use for generating a DNS tunnel. The public source code is still under discussion with our legal guys, so you can just follow me on Twitter to see whether actually it will be public at some time, I don't know. All right. It was quite fun actually. Suddenly like you need to, so new card declined, oh, then next one approved, oh, good, let me just take a screenshot. How to stay secure? I mean, we have done numerous audits to date. We have analyzed hundreds of SAP systems, and what we see in many companies, some failed attempts to secure their SAP infrastructure, and there are certain reasons for that. The first one is this old method of auditing. This comes from these ancient consultancy companies. It is flawed because then you have, I don't know, 2 guys, 3 guys coming and looking at your one of your production systems and then generating a report. It doesn't work. It is also wrong because when you look at an SAP landscape, there is always this 3 to 5 systems landscape, like development system, test system, QA system, and then the production system, or user acceptance system. So the problem there is people focus on the production system. But when we analyze these business users, 7% of the users in non-production systems, okay, have the same password as in production systems. So what happens? There's a test system. It is open, widely open, because there is no sensitive data on it. An attacker hacks the system, and then they can just do offline password cracking and then access to the production system without even using any kind of exploits. This is very common. And 7%, don't underestimate it. We're talking about hundreds of users. And these users, which have common accounts in the complete landscape, they are usually very powerful users. They are either service users, or they are system administrator users, or developer accounts. So the first thing you should do is addressing the complete picture. And the first place to do it is when you assess these systems, you should assess the complete landscape. I mean, reduce the scope. Don't go for 10 production systems. Go for a single landscape or maybe 2 landscapes. This works much, much better. Because politically also, this approach, do an audit and then 3 years later do another one, where the business asks, okay, did you get the systems checked? Yes. And then they move on. This doesn't work. You don't achieve real security there. And the other part of the complete picture is all these important attack vectors. You need to cover them. So it is usually easier to cover them on smaller landscapes, get lessons learned and proper hardening guidelines, and then apply this on bigger systems or broader scope. So the second way to do this is implementing a holistic process. I mean, these audits are also focused on the prevention part. So again, we have this beautiful orange report, which is never red, never green, always orange. So this orange report, where it tells you to do certain things. And when you look at your SAP systems, most of the things you cannot fix anyways. So this means focusing on prevention only, and this should be avoided. So you should be also focused on detection part, which means really detecting security events real time. Let's say suddenly on an internet-facing SAP system, you have a new administrator user in the SAP system, but this user doesn't exist on any part of the SAP landscape. This is suspicious. You need to be able to detect this, because these kind of things, when you have an incident like this, they are very real. And when somebody is waking up in the middle of the night, it is really worth it. And the impact, the security awareness part is also very, very important with them. So the detection is important. I mean, detection on the business processes. And of course, the response part, where you can automatically fix these issues, block these issues, or do escalation. The only way that works securing SAP systems, in my opinion, is automating these processes. I mean, you should see SAP systems as a single application. And you should have automation as much as you can. Automated security scans, automated compliance checks, which are verifiable, where you can also track this information. And same is with ABAP code. The custom written code is very, very problematic. So there are usually a lot of issues there. And you need to also get them scanned as well, because the people who are coding ABAP in businesses are not very much security aware. They don't know what cross-site scripting or ABAP injection or what these things mean. They have a deadline. There's a quality check, which means checking the left side of the report, right side of the report, numbers match, so functionality test complete, and then deploy this to production, this kind of approach. In my opinion, the event correlation is one of the most important things in SAP systems. So you should have proper CM integration, where you have really the detection capability. Because as I said, if you focus just on the prevention part, trying to fix these issues, you will never succeed. But when there is the detection part, when you have some incidents which you can prove to the management, then you have better progress. And when the people have the buy-in, then they are more eager to do the work, because they see that this is real. It is not coming from some checklist which was in the internet. So, about us, we are a company in Germany, in Munich, and what we do is we assess and secure the SAP system. So I wanted to share my experience with you with this presentation. The security suite is our application. You saw a little bit the penetration testing module. And we basically secure large energy companies, oil companies, banking and central banks and these kind of institutions. So we are constantly facing the industry best practices and we are working for improving them. My name is Ertuğrul Arsal, a little bit late to say that. I'm a security researcher and I have audited hundreds of SAP systems to date. And last year, SAP published, I think, 75, 76 sub-security patches based on the vulnerabilities I have reported. And I'm also the founder of ESNC. So when you focus to SAP systems, always, take it like a menu, just focus on a topic, do it on a broad case where you can really accomplish something, and then use the lesson learned. This is the idea to do it. So whether it is the PCI DSS compliance, auditing, or the risk management business part, you should always contaminate it and then really focus and, of course, define the success criteria ahead so that you can show it as success. So, thank you for joining me today, and many thanks to Eric Bushman from Paymetric for his input, and to my team as well. If you have any questions, I can answer. I cannot guess how much time I have, but 5 minutes, that's excellent. Yes, please.
Are the auditors beginning to ask questions about these things?
Are the auditors beginning to ask questions about this? Yes, this is getting more and more into focus of the auditors, internal audit teams. Yes.
How do you compare perhaps
I think I'm not able to comment on it because we are officially competitors in that case. But Marioni is a great guy, so. Okay, next question. Sorry, I cannot hear. Oh God, I cannot hear either. Somebody can help with the microphone? Sorry.
Is that real, or were you just showing us that somebody built that into SAP?
Well, I was that somebody actually built it. You mean the Twitter interface, right?
Yeah.
Well, for fun, while researching rootkits, this is what I did basically. And it is real. The Twitter account is all real. Maybe it's protected account right now, I don't know. But yeah, it is real, it works, and it tweets. So if you... There were credit card numbers there. I didn't mask them. Oh. No, they are generated card numbers. It's not the card numbers of real people. But good that you noticed that, yeah. No, I showed the functionality when SAP system is tampered, and if this would have been a productive system in internet or in the internal network of a company which is producing or processing payment card information, it would be possible that this system would be tweeting about that if an attacker would be tampering certain functionality of the SAP system. So it is a very real attack in theory and in practice. But I don't know anybody else who had done it other than me, so. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, everyone.